Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about the comparisons between At the Mountains of Madness and Silent Hill 2. Eventually, I want to get into how Silent Hill 2, besides being one of the best games of all time, don't you dare fight me on that one, it's also one of the few games that really tackles the narrative structure of a horror story properly, perhaps better than other media formats even. Granted, Mountains of Madness being involved in this discussion is mostly a formality, and I could talk about Silent Hill 2 forever, but I also want an A on this assignment, so... Also, spoilers ahead about Silent Hill 2, At the Mountains of Madness, and Bloodborne. Beyond that, this is a video about horror, so, expect some horrifying visual displays, possibly, maybe. What's that, viewer? You already have a question. But Sammer, why don't you use Bloodborne? It has some Cthulhu stuff in it, right? Like tentacles and spindly arms and stuff? And you're not wrong, but Bloodborne barely fits the structure of horror in my opinion. This will make sense further into the video, but I'll distill my Bloodborne analysis into this. Yes, there are scary things in Bloodborne, but if you have the capacity to use a sword that transforms into a goddamn giant sledgehammer to fight said scary things, I would argue that it's not all that horrifying for the most part. Okay, moving on. So the narrative structure in the horror literary genre has been nicely condensed into 4 stages by John Clute. These stages are sighting, thickening, revel, and aftermath. A brief summary of each. Sighting is basically the moment where, for lack of a better phrase, crap starts to go down. Think the moment you find that mutilated soldier at the beginning of Outlast.
They killed us. You got out. The variants. You can't fight them. You have died.
Or that moment when Lee's in the car in The Walking Dead and the police cars speed by at the beginning of the game, signaling the coming of the zombie apocalypse. It's when the horror and terror begins to form, so to speak. Then there's thickening. This is the stage that takes up most of any body of work that's considered horror. It's the moment where confusion reigns, when the curtain moves but there's nothing behind it, when you open the closet waiting for the jump scare but nothing comes, when the room you were just in completely changes its layout when you re-enter it. During the thickening, you're forced down a path you don't want to follow, and logic is thrown out the window. Now if you've played Silent Hill 2, at this point you're nodding your head like crazy. Revel can best be described as the big, horrifying reveal, when the true nature of what's around you becomes exposed. Not much else to say in that regard. The aftermath is the moment you become aware that the story is finally over. It's also when you recognize what's to come. Cool. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to that analysis stuff. The crux of what I want to say is that Silent Hill 2 exhibits these stages with aplomb, much in the same way Mountains of Madness does. But I would also add that, because Silent Hill 2 is a video game, it interacts with these stages better than Mountains of Madness. So let's go through each stage with each medium and see what's what. The sighting that occurs in both Mountains and Silent Hill 2 is pretty obvious. With Mountains, it's when the science team falls into a pile of dead animal bones, which, by the way, if ever there were a reason for me to haul ass out of any place, it'd be the one with the pile of dead animal bones. For Silent Hill 2, it's when the protagonist, James Sunderland, stumbles across super large streaks of blood. From afar, a terrifying figure can be seen shrouded in fog, before quickly disappearing. Which, again, by the way, streaks of blood equals let me get the hell out of here. From here we move right into the thickening. I mentioned getting the hell out of both of those situations as quickly as possible, but this ties back into the fact that the protagonists in horror are forced down a path they can't get away from, and that applies to Silent Hill 2 for sure. The titular Silent Hill is a freaky place covered in fog, and it's impossible to escape the maze once you enter it. Besides that, James is looking for his wife, so he does have a reason to stick around in such a creepy place. And, as is revealed later in the game, the town is really a representation of James' intense psychological trauma, and one of the themes in the game is that you can't really escape from something like that. That being said, I feel like Mountains of Madness doesn't really exhibit that quality well. The science team has multiple chances to realize that they've stumbled on something horrible, pun entirely intended by the way, and they never turn back. The onus, in this case, is on them. You could argue that scientific curiosity pushes the team forward, but I had to believe that at some point fear would override rationality. Moving on from there, Silent Hill 2 really digs deep into the thickening. The game plays tricks on you in a variety of ways, from Maria getting murdered by Pyramid Head, only to show up completely unharmed minutes later, to the fact that none of the people James meets see Silent Hill the same way he does.
It's hot as hell in here.
You see it too. For me, it's always like this.
The music is strange and uncomfortable to listen to while playing as well. Hell, even that hilarious dog ending is really eerie and confusing. The game truly doesn't care if you understand it or not, and everything, down to the voice acting, is done in such a way as to make you feel incredibly uncomfortable. Mountains of Madness approaches thickening differently. It uses a cold, callous, scientific approach to create a sense of unease in the reader. Sure, it's easy to describe and understand elder gods, but when they're a corpse that's being used for research. And it's easy to understand what a Shoggoth is supposed to be, when it's not chasing you down a mountain path. Lovecraft gets detailed to the point of being overly pedantic sometimes, but it's necessary in establishing the horror that occurs later on in the novel. Mountains also uses the fear of the unknown and the unexplained to create a sense of horror, such as the infamous moment when Danforth looks back at the mountains as he escapes, going insane as a result. Silent Hill leaves parts of its story unexplained or open for interpretation, which is a form of the unknown, but it's also an inherently visual medium that requires player input. You can't force the camera in a written piece of text, meaning you'll never know what it is that Danforth saw. In turn, I think Silent Hill 2 handles the concept of revel brilliantly. Throughout the game, James is searching for his sick wife, who he believes has been dead for 3 years. As the game progresses, the note that his wife wrote to him, telling James that she's in Silent Hill, fades over time. He also meets a character named Maria, who looks just like his wife, albeit with a different personality.
Mary? No, you're not.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my late wife.
In the game's ending moments, it's revealed that James Sunderland murdered his wife by smothering her in her sleep. The murder is implied to have happened recently.
She died because she was sick?
No, I killed her.
You killer! Why'd you do it? I hate you! I want her back! Give her back to me! I knew it! You didn't care about her! I hate you, James! I hate you! I hate you! I hate you!
This is the moment of revel, and also the moment where every aspect of the game is turned on its head. James turns out to be a horrendously unreliable, perhaps even unlikable narrator. His wife was only dead to him in the sense that her illness left him sexually frustrated and mentally exhausted. Further on, at the moment of revel, one of 3 endings, the aftermath, so to speak, can be obtained, and these are based on how the player has been controlling James. For example, if the player hasn't been healing James when he gets hurt by monsters, and is neglectful of the characters he meets throughout his journey, he'll commit suicide by driving himself into Silent Hill's lake.
Now I understand. The real reason I came to this town. I wonder, what was I afraid of? Without you, Mary, I've got nothing. Now we can be together.
I find this aspect of Silent Hill 2 incredible. The game presents aspects of horror that could only exist as a video game mechanic. You can't control the science team in Mountains of Madness, directing them where to go and what to do, and besides that, because James is barely able to defend himself, and you are in direct control of his character, you experience a feeling of dread and horror that could only exist within a video game. In my opinion, the moment of revel in Mountains of Madness is significantly more underwhelming in comparison. It essentially boils down to the science team learning about the history of the Elder Ones and why they came to Earth. You could also argue it's the moment Danforth turns around to face that eldritch horror, but it just doesn't really create any sense of horror in me, which I guess goes to show how objective horror can be. That being said, in my opinion, if you're not really scared or horrified by a body of work, it has to have done something else well to make up for that. In my opinion, Mountains of Madness falls in comparison to Silent Hill 2. The latter feels like it's the superior piece of media, and also is a better form of horror overall because of how video games combine everything from graphics, to music, to the possibility of multiple endings in order to create a horrifying experience. But those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening.